if I could give one bit of advice to people just starting out, just don't compare. Don't compare.
Right.
Just evaluate if what you're doing feels right for you.
I was just going to say, what is working for your marriage?
Yeah.
Focus on that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would say to somebody, you're asking for your spouse to be perfect, a 10, perfect 10.
Yeah.
Are you a perfect 10?
Right. No.
And sometimes I've even asked that question and someone will say, oh, yeah, no, I'm not. I'm missing the mark on these few things. Well, then maybe give him some grace if he's missing the mark on those few things, and then figure out intentionally how you can come together to fill those gaps in, or what's going to take to do that. This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 Lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Hello, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to our continued relationship series, Love Actually. We are on part 4, and I'm really excited to have our guest back again, Miss Amy Werner, Mrs. Amy Werner, Mistress. Amy has been on our podcast before, and in case you missed her previous episode, go back and check it out. But I would love for Amy to reintroduce herself to the audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Sarah. So I am Amy Werner. I am a lot of things. I think I get to choose different ways to identify myself in different situations, huh? Yeah. So personally, I think I always lead with I am a wife, mother, daughter, sister, friend, community member.
Yeah.
All those roles are really important to me. And professionally, I work in the behavioral health field, helping connect people to care. I work for a large corporation that offers programs nationally. And I also am a certified parent coach. So I work with parents who struggle with adolescents to young adults who live with severe and persistent mental illness or other behavioral health diagnoses.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. But we're not talking about those things today.
No. Probably the first one I identified as, right? The wife.
Yes, the wife. And you've been married for how long?
This month, it'll be 29 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And since we're talking about relationships in this series, my goal was to invite different people in the community, whether they're licensed therapists or they work in other areas, just people who have been married for a while. And all of our guests have been married over 10 years, I think maybe even 14 years or longer. And so 29 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah. And I think all of us have been saying, and will continue to say, we're not experts in marriage.
Yeah.
Even if someone's a licensed marriage and family therapist, it doesn't make them an expert in other people's relationships. However, we all have a lot of lived experiences that we are sharing here on this series. So I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, I'm glad to.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I'll set it up. We're going to talk a little bit about marriage through, medical chronic illness, medical events, chronic illness, medical struggles, staying married through financial hardships, maybe some advice for newly married couples because you got married when?
Gosh, I was maybe just 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
Just turned 24, I think, when I got married.
Yeah.
We had children pretty quickly.
Did you?
25 and 26 when I had my kids.
Yeah.
I look at my own children who are now 26 and 27, and I think, who let me do that?
Right.
Who thought that was a good idea? Yeah. So, we, this is just a funny story that came to me, but probably our 26th anniversary or so, we went out for dinner. And I think, as you're aware, my husband had a major health event. And I think it was our first time out to dinner in 3 or 4 months as he was working through recovery from a big surgery. And there was a young couple in front of us. We were getting ice cream. So we got out to dinner and then went to get ice cream. We're standing in line. And this young couple, we started chatting with them. They're like, it's our anniversary. It's our first anniversary. We're like, oh, it's our 26th. And the guy turned to my husband and said, "How have you stayed married so long?" And my husband said, "You should probably ask her." And I said, "Well, that was the first good thing right there. He knew to defer to me." But what we told this young couple, and it came to us kind of authentically in the moment, and now I've shared it a million times over, is we've lived our vows. I mean, we did not stand in front of the church and our family and friends and say we were going to live happily ever after.
Right.
You know, you make some promises up there, and we did the traditional vows of in sickness and in health, rich or poor, good times and bad times. And we've had the blessings and the hardships of all of that, right?
Yeah,
and we've both been committed to working through them. And it's not always easy, and it's not always been really pretty.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just said it, like, marriage is not fairy tale, right? No. It's not happily ever after. It comes with life experiences. Yeah. And that's usually highs and lows, mountains and valleys. Yeah. Right. And so, okay, well, let's just jump in. I mean, share with us, like, how were you able to maintain staying committed to vows through some of these really big hardships, specifically like a major health event?
Yeah. Well, that was probably the easiest part.
Really?
So, when he had this major health event, we had been married 25, 26 years at the time. And as I saw him laying there in the hospital bed, I realized I had not been an adult without him. And I had not gone through any of the hard things that we'd gone through I hadn't done anything hard by myself.
Right.
And I think that actually was probably the easiest hard thing we did, because I realized in that scary moment all that we'd been through. Our life flashed before my eyes. And so I think since then we've lived probably a gentler marriage. Yeah. Probably we just really appreciate what matters more. I used to sweat the small stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I mean, if we start there, that was probably the last hard thing we've been through. And that was probably the easiest of the hard things marriage-wise, if that makes sense. But, I've shared with you, we were young. We did not have a lot of money. And then I got pregnant sooner than we had expected. And then I got pregnant again sooner than I expected. So going back to work didn't really make sense. So we had to navigate living on a shoestring, which is stressful.
Right.
Right. We had to learn, we had 2 babies. Nobody was sleeping.
Right.
That was hard. We were young ourselves, so we were still maturing. We came from really different families. I think that's the thing too, is people don't anticipate how you were raised, how much it impacts how you're going to raise your children. And I don't know that we spend a lot of time talking about that before we have kids.
Right.
So, I would say the 2 biggest issues I just mentioned is what we've had in our marriage is money and children.
Money and children.
Money and children. We came from just different perspectives financially. We just had different ideas about money and different ideas about raising kids.
Right.
So we had to navigate that. That took a lot of energy over the years.
Did you guys, did you go through any kind of marriage therapy or counseling with anyone, or you just figured it out on your own? We did do a little therapy, not much, but pretty far in, 15 years in or so. Yeah.
And that can be part of like the next part of the story, because we did have a long chronic stress in our life. We figured it out on our own. And this was a little secret that worked for us. I don't know that this would work for other people, but when we finally identified that money and children were the biggest struggles, we sort of divided the power of that. So he kind of took over the ultimate veto power with money. He's very much better with money than I am. I finally had to concede to that. And we would try to work it out together. And if we could not come to an agreement, then ultimately it was his decision when it came to big purchases or savings or investments. And the same was with the kids. I was the primary parent for many years. He traveled. He was gone on the road for about 15 years of raising our kids.
Right.
And so, and I was a stay-at-home mom on and off or part-time work. So when it came to the kids, if we couldn't agree or come to an agreement, then I had the veto power. I ultimately got to make the decisions.
Yeah.
So I think giving that balance of power, actually, because we're both really strong-willed, was what worked for us, but we didn't get there easy.
Right. Probably through trial and error.
Yeah, lots of fighting, lots of, frustration, but wanting to fight through it. Like, I'm not afraid to fight. I'm not afraid to have hard conversations because, that's where you can get to the resolution. So fortunately, he's also willing to have those hard conversations and fight.
Right.
Yeah. And then we had to learn how to fight kinder and better over the years. I think that's another thing.
Yeah. You make a good point. Sometimes you have one person in the relationship who's a conflict avoidant. And so that can in and of itself cause problems.
Right.
Because the other partner wants to really dig in, talk about the hard things, go at it even just to like get to a resolution.
Yeah.
And then someone's like leaving the table, leaving the room because they don't want to talk about those hard things.
Right.
And that can create future conflict.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and one thing I want to mention too, so I think one of the secrets to marriage is having two people that'll work at it. But I also think a big secret is some dumb luck.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Like when you get married, I don't care if you're 19 or 29 or 39. I think we all set out with the intention to do this for the rest of our lives, however long that is. And so I often say the one lucky thing that happened to me in my life is I met the person who I was well suited for.
Yeah.
Forever. Who, we had the same goals, we had the same ideals, and we're both willing to work, and we grew together. But I think there's so many things that can happen in life that can make that not the outcome from 50% of the marriages, right?
Right.
I don't think it's that people just give up or don't want to work. But you didn't know.
No.
I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, that is, we talked previously on our podcast about soulmates, and it's like, so if you believe in soulmates and you land with your soulmate, is that luck? Is that, predestined, planned? Does that mean that, you're just, things are going to be easy? I mean, you're right. It is.
Yeah. And what's a soulmate? Like, I don't know about you and your husband, but my husband and I are nothing alike.
Right. Right.
We don't look alike. We don't think alike. We actually politically and even when it comes to sort of religious practice are not probably well matched on paper.
Right.
But because we challenge each other and we respect the other person so much, we allow each other to be who each person is and not try to change the other one.
Right. Right. Not try to persuade them onto, your side, whichever angle you're looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you mentioned previously when we were chatting how you probably didn't even talk about faith and politics before you got married.
No, not at all. I don't think it was part of our climate at the time, 29 years ago. And I was young. I didn't know. He was really cute, really fun, really driven. And we knew that we aligned in our values.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful that it wasn't important to me because I might have excluded us from getting married.
That's interesting. I mean, that's a huge point right there. Yeah. I mean, but you just said it. You aligned in your values.
Right.
And so that's maybe what's really important is the person you're choosing. Do you have similar values?
Right.
Even if some of these nuances differ.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love that. Like in your relationship, it sounds like I hate to be so cliche, but agree to disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we need to be aligned, I say that we've learned to come to agreements. I don't even care if we don't agree, but we have to come to agreements about where we're going to live or what we're going to drive or how we're going to spend our money or, things with the kids.
Yeah.
Who are now adults, but still, right? We have to be in agreement. So we've had to learn. And and we didn't learn the easy way. We did it the hard way.
Tell us more about that, Amy.
Yeah, we like to do things the hard way. So, and I think our biggest challenge too, Sarah, I mentioned on my last podcast that that I was here last time I was here, that we have an adult child who lives with severe and persistent mental illness. And it's been part of our life since she was 11. So 16 years, more than half of our marriage. And like any chronic illness, it brings so much unknown. It brings a lot of stress. It brings a lot of financial hardship. The difference with behavioral health versus maybe like a medical issue is, I mentioned this before to you too, that it's behavioral. So of course, we think it's behavior. We think we should be able to parent it out. We come to realizations at different times about the best way to approach. And that was, probably one of the bigger strains on our marriage. Raising children is a huge strain on our marriage. I mean, period. But, just navigating that. And I think that what's interesting is at times where it really divided us, and maybe because we didn't agree on things or because we had to make changes. Like there were times I couldn't really work, and he was traveling a lot, and I would resent that he got to be in a hotel room all week. And I was, at home taking care of all this. We didn't get time alone often because of it, which I think is typical. But so I think what pushed us apart in some ways is also what held us together, because we also knew we couldn't do this well without the other one. Right. So that was a realization. So maybe those were not the best years of our marriage, but they strengthened us and led us to appreciate these years now more.
Yeah. That does make sense. I know. I'm just thinking about that. What should have been or was even pushing you apart, his career that caused him to travel, you staying home, and also probably developing some resentment because he's getting a break in a hotel room. You would probably love a break back then.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. But what was maybe should have or was pushing you apart, I like that. You said it almost strengthened you.
Yeah, it's definitely what held us together, because we knew at that point that we could not be together.
Right.
We couldn't not be a 2-parent household and take care of our other child and meet the needs of her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you recognize that one another needed the other spouse.
And those years just weren't about our marriage as much.
Right.
Is what I can, in hindsight, because it's 2020, look back and see like that, those years just weren't about us.
Yeah.
The beginning was, now is, those middle years aren't.
Right.
That's not what they're there for.
And it was about raising kids, but also, raising one kid with a little more need than the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the focus had to shift. Maybe that's part of the secret is like sometimes in marriage and just for a season, you have to shift your focus to something else so that in the long run, the marriage stays sustainable.
Well, I think so. And I think I look at, I'm fortunate. I'm surrounded, interestingly, by a lot of strong marriages. So my parents did not stay together. My husband's parents did not stay together. A few of our siblings, spouses' parents did not stay together. I can't do all the math right now. But so we didn't really have great examples of marriage. And the generation before that did stay together, they didn't like each other. Right? Like our grandparents, like clearly were not fans of each other.
Yeah.
So we didn't have great examples. My great examples come from my peers. So my siblings, our siblings, both sides, have all been married. We've been married the least amount of time at 29 years. So we're all between like 29 and 36 years. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Right? So
for sure.
I have 2 siblings. He has 2. Like that's a lot. And then we have a lot of friends. We have several friends who are not married to their first spouse or married currently, but we have a lot of friends who are married, and we've watched all them go through those middle years too.
Right.
Where their sole purpose was raising their children.
Yeah.
And then it's fun because we all have adult children now. We're watching the reconnection in marriage. We're watching our friends evolve individually.
Yeah.
Like, and then as couples again. And we've been there for 20 plus years with a lot of them. So we've seen all of it, right?
You've literally did life together.
Literally have done life. And I have many friends who will say, we didn't think you and Jody would still be together. They'll say, they're like, it's amazing. And it's true. I mean, it's hard, but it's It takes a lot of effort. One of your guests said that. Like, it's not that it's hard work. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And it's like dating. Like, you have to keep putting the effort in. You can't just stop once you've hit the I do part.
Yeah. And I think it's about both people putting the effort in, right?
It has to be. It has to be two healthy people that are willing to work individually on themselves and then collectively on their marriage.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I hope I'm not having a brain freeze. I don't know if you just said it a minute ago or you said it when we were talking earlier, but you said that for you and your husband, neither of you ever wanted to quit at the same time.
We never wanted to quit at the same time.
Yeah.
He will say, because he's kinder than I am, he'll say he never wanted to quit. I think there were times where we were like, this is really hard and I don't want this. We were fighting all the time or arguing or disagreeing or just not enjoying each other's company.
Mm-hmm.
And I know neither of us wanted that marriage anymore.
Right.
And most of the time that led each of us and us collectively to work on it because we were like, I don't want to be here. We've always been great about dating. We've always been great about being intentional with our time, carving out time for each other. But there were times I think where you're just too tired to work. You're like, I don't want to work this hard.
Right. It shouldn't be this hard. I hear that a lot with couples that are struggling. They say, it shouldn't be this hard. Maybe.
Yeah. And I think then it's just about like humbling yourself, being the first, someone has to be the first one to like break down the wall.
Right.
And then whether you want to go out or not, just do it or just sit there and talk to each other, whether you want to or not, you know?
Yeah.
But it takes constant effort.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's just the biggest thing is that you have to know that you're forever going to keep working on it.
Yeah. Maybe that's the point is like, it's not just like one and done. It's not just like one episode of work or one season of struggle and then now it's perfect and everything's going to be sunshine and roses for the rest of the 20, 30, whatever years you have together. Yeah. It's constant work. Someone said on an earlier podcast about choosing the other person over convenience. Like it's easy to choose convenience.
Yeah.
When you're tired, when you're struggling, when you're, you've been all day long with a sick child and you just want to veg out. I mean, that would be easy to choose convenience.
Yeah.
But you have to choose your partner. You have to choose your spouse.
Yeah. And I think one thing, like we have very different interests. This is another thing is I think we've also kept our autonomy. I had no interest in sitting in a tree hunting with my husband. So I wasn't going to do that,
Oh, yeah.
Whatever my hobby of the year was, he wasn't going to go train for a marathon with me or, there's shows I like to watch. He wasn't going to sit down and watch. So I think we also chose ourselves. And that's part of it too, is we kept ourselves healthy and independent and having fun things. I saw something recently that said, secret to a healthy marriage is you got to keep your girlfriends.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I don't think one person should be anybody's anything. So I also credit my best friends for keeping me married all these years. Doing the thoughtful things he couldn't do or being able to just, listen to me when he couldn't.
Right.
Understanding where his gaps were and finding some other folks to fill them in, meet my needs there. But yeah, I think we do choose. We also had to look at how do we carve out enough time as a family, as individuals, as a couple. Like we, have been working on that since I remember we had a babysitter from Meredith who came every Thursday night. And sometimes all the money we had was to pay her.
Wow.
And so we'd go walk around the mall with a cup of coffee or whatever, just to get away and have our own time.
Yes.
Because I think when you're at home, it's really easy to like parallel, just exist, put on the TV or whatever, but to have like intentional time away.
Yeah.
We always took a trip every year, even if we couldn't really afford anything great. There were times, or we couldn't go far. We'd go to North Hills and stay in a hotel on Marriott points there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he accrued from all his travel. Like we really just try to be creative and intentional. I think we've always tried to make sure. Now I travel for work, he travels for work. So we look at our time week to week and say, when are we going to have a date?
Right.
Still, even though there's nobody else in the house, like when are we going to go out and just focus on each other? Like one night, one day, one afternoon. Yeah. So I think you do have to make that choice over and over and over and over and over and over in perpetuity.
Until death do you part.
Until death do you part. Yeah. And there's lots of times where I'll say, is this worth dying? Like, that's a long time. But yeah.
Wow. Intention. Yes.
Yeah.
Just being intentional. I think it's so easy. And I'm just thinking of it from a female wife perspective. It's so easy to get sucked in to raising children. There are probably a lot of moms listening who have children with special needs.
Yeah.
Chronically ill children, especially. I just can't imagine how hard that is not to just become all consumed with caring for that child and neglecting your spouse, but not meaning to.
Right. Well, and I don't even know if it's with a chronically ill child or a special needs child. I think the men in my life who I'm super close with have all shared with me at times that, including my husband, that I think their focus remains on us first and the children second almost in most cases.
Yeah.
And I think most moms shift to kids first, spouse second.
Yeah.
In the heart of raising, I think just biologically, that's really typical. And I think, I've heard from several men in my life that they felt neglected. They felt put aside. They, she always chooses the kids over me. And I'm like, yeah, yes, she will.
She birthed them.
Yeah. So I think that's I think that's probably one of the most common themes, right, in marriage. And, and I also think you have to accept when you bring another human into the world that even though love is not divided, but attention is. There's only so much.
Right.
So much energy. So, and again, that's about, I guess, communication, whether your communication is lovely and you can sit down and have a nice conversation, or if the communication comes as a result of an argument. So, when your kids get old enough that like you can't fight in front of them anymore, or you can't even have those discussions because they're everywhere, like those middle school years.
Yep.
So we live near a school. And it's a 3-mile loop. And we used to, if we had an issue and we were just like seething at each other, we would tell the kids, we're going to take a walk. And the first mile, we would be like addressing the issue. And then when we got, it was usually a weekend, so there was nobody there, thank goodness. When we got around the school complex where it was pretty abandoned, that we would blow up sometimes and scream and yell and stop. And one would walk in the other direction and whatever. But by the time we rounded the bend to the 3rd mile, we usually came to some sort of resolution.
Okay.
And that's how we learned how to walk all the way through the conversation and not walk away at the ugly part.
Yes.
But so for us, often the communication came from a place of hurt or anger and started as an argument, but we learned to walk through all that and come to a place where we had peace. Neither of us, the one thing I will say, neither of us are ever okay if the other one's upset with us. Like we can't stand that, Right. I think most couples are probably like that. But we had to learn literally to walk through the hard argument.
That's beautiful, actually. That's a really beautiful analogy. I mean, I can just picture it. And what a practical application. Like other people listening to this can apply. Like go walk your neighborhood and walk it out. And, psychologically, something happens with your brain.
Yeah.
When you walk and you're doing this bilateral movement, it's processing.
Right.
I mean, we won't get into all the science behind it, but that is an actual thing that happens.
Well, the other actual thing, and from what I've heard over the years, and this is me like not being as scientific as I could about it, but like to have a hard conversation with a man when you're parallel versus face to face with them. I mean, there's that biology of being threatened when you're looking them in the eye, right?
Right.
And so really having those conversations when you're side by side, not even looking at each other.
Yeah.
It's actually easier.
Right.
So, but we didn't do that on purpose. Like that was not a genius move on our part. That was just what worked for us.
Right. Was that the luck factor?
It was the luck. It's just what worked for us. It was available to us. And we found that that's how, and now we can sit and have a hard conversation and get all the way past being ugly and accusatory and bringing in things that have nothing to do with what we're arguing about. And I think that's another thing is I think you can't be afraid to argue or disagree. I mean, I think I had this idea early on that marriage was peaceful and romantic and a good marriage.
Yeah.
Because I saw the other side of it. But I also will tell you one of the things that I regret, and I'm not a person who lives with a lot of regret, but when I think about all the 29 years, I spent a lot of my early years looking at what my husband didn't do or wasn't, or what our marriage didn't look like.
Right.
Instead of looking at what was or what is or what was good. And it was really just through actually a very close relationship with my sister, where we used to joke and say, like, my husband's gifts are maybe her husband's gaps and vice versa, right? And instead of me being envious that her husband was better at gift giving than mine, like appreciating that maybe that wasn't my husband's strength and he had other strengths, right? And I think we helped each other, for example, come to that appreciation. But it took me like 20 years to really get to a place of like, my marriage is my marriage, and it works because of who we are and what's important to us. And other people, you know, they figured out how to get through their marriage. And I can't look at it like, again, my sister worked full time. Her husband worked full time. So they did everything 50-50. Yeah. She worked, he worked. He did half the kid stuff. She did half the kid stuff. He did half the cooking. She did half the cooking. Right. And I used to just see like, well, he does half of this and I do all of this. Well, but my husband did all the money earning and managing, and I did all the household running. And that's just how it landed for us. So we were 50-50 too. It was just 100-100. Yeah. Right. And it was just reframing how I looked at our marriage too, and just tried to see what I had instead of what I didn't. That was, if I could give one bit of advice to people just starting out, just don't compare. Right. Just evaluate if what you're doing feels right for you.
I was just going to say, what is working for your marriage? Focus on that. Yeah. And I mean, you know, I would say to somebody, you know, you're asking for your spouse to be perfect, a 10, perfect 10. Yeah. Are you a perfect 10?
Right. No.
You know, and sometimes I've even asked that question and someone will say, oh, yeah, no, I'm not. You know, I'm missing the mark on these few things. Well, then maybe give him some grace if he's missing the mark on those few things, and then figure out intentionally how you can come together to fill those gaps in, or what's going to take to do that.
Or it doesn't even matter. Like,
you're
when
right.
I think back at like the gift thing, like for example, I knew that wasn't a big thing for my husband when I dated him, but it's also not important to me.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't have fallen in love with him and gone all the way to marry him if that was a big thing for me, right? So why suddenly would I care if that wasn't a strength of his?
Right. And you were only maybe focusing on that because you were comparing.
I was comparing. And I was like, well, but there are so many things that, again, you know, that he has great strengths that other spouses don't have, but they were the ones that were important to me. And I had but that one took me a long time to put down.
And it probably takes maturity too. Yeah. Because when you're young, in your early 20s, or maybe just even immature in your marriage or relationship. I mean, it could be a second marriage, but it's still maybe new and immature in that long-standing relationship. Yeah, you look at things differently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it's got to be a process and a journey. And I mean, our marriage doesn't look the same now as it did 29 years ago.
Right. It can't.
It can't.
I mean, you're different. You've evolved, so to speak. Yeah. You know, you've grown, you've matured.
And fortunately, we've done that together, because I think that can be the other thing is one person grows and one person doesn't, or you change in different directions. Right. So, you know, I think that's the other lucky piece for us.
What do you think about couples who maybe one person is looking to have their emotional needs met by the spouse? Well, I mean, do you have any advice for couples like that?
Well, I think, you know, again, there's that can be tricky, because I think if this is your life partner, they're the person you want to share everything with, right? And you have to know what your needs are and evaluate probably before you get married, can they meet those needs? Right. But there's times that, again, I think this is a man-woman thing. So maybe this applies differently to like a same-sex marriage, or maybe this is just personality for us and our generation. But my husband is very practical and he's going to fix it. Yeah. So if I come to him with a complaint, he isn't going to like rub my back and tell me he's sorry and that sounds so hard and do I need a cup of tea? You know, he's going to be like, well, what are you going to do about it? Or what can we do about it? Or what can be done about it? And he's just going to kind of suck it up, buttercup, let's move forward. So if I'm looking really to like emotionally be nurtured, he's not my guy.
Right. you're going to maybe look to fix that or heal that through something else or somebody else. I mean, like a friend, a sister, something, a therapist, whatever.
All those things.
I do. So I see that a lot of times in couples, and I don't do a lot of couples work now, but in the past I had done some, and that comes up a lot. You know, the female, if it's a heterosexual relationship, the female is looking for her male spouse to meet her emotional needs. And I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen all the time.
So let's get into like a little touchy subject.
Okay.
So, another thing we find too, right, is that I'm looking to be emotionally connected first and foremost before I'm interested in any kind of physical connection. You know, so that can be a huge point of contention in a marriage, right? Like, we haven't talked, we haven't been on a date, we haven't had 5 minutes with each other. Don't come at me now. Like, no.
Or I've been with the kids all day.
Yeah.
And they've been hanging on me.
Yeah.
I don't need you to touch me now. Too.
Right. Or you've kind of been a jerk. And, you know, it's going to take a little bit more than like, hey. So, but then understand what took me a long time and him a long time to understand. And I think this is a very typical male-female thing, is in order for him to feel emotionally connected to me, he needed some kind of physical connection.
Right.
And then in order for me to want to have a physical connection, I needed us to feel emotionally connected. And when we're over here on these two islands,
that's right,
like bridging that gap probably is one of the hardest challenges in a marriage. And it takes a lot of intention too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, a lot of conversation, and it takes some courage to be the first one to kind of say, I'm going to meet your need.
Yep.
So you can meet my need.
And it takes maturity to hear that from your spouse.
Yeah.
So I have a whole theory about this. It's maybe kind of silly and frivolous, but it's like the I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine kind of dance, right? And so if somebody steps up first, right, you know, it takes that one person to be like, all right, I'm going to be maybe, I don't want to say the bigger person, but I'm just going to be more intentional in this. I'll scratch your back. I'll meet your need.
Yes.
And then that makes you want to go meet their need. And then they're going to want to meet your need. It's like this back and forth dance.
But it has to be that.
Yes.
It has to be back and forth.
For sure.
Right. And that's where I think when, like, anyone I've ever spoken to that is contemplating separating from their husband, or has separated from their spouse or whatever, like, you have to understand too that just because it's worked in my marriage, it's because there's two people working, and that's where you have to keep evaluating.
Literally, it takes two to tango.
It literally takes two to tango, because nobody is going to be fulfilled in their marriage if they're the only one working. They may stay married, but they're not going to be fulfilled in that.
Right. And they shouldn't, I don't want to say they shouldn't, but it's understandable why they would not want to stay in that relationship if they're the only person putting in the energy and the effort and the intention.
Because I think we all deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, I don't know, I read somewhere that like 90% of your happiness is dependent on who you choose to share your life with.
That's interesting.
You know, I mean, that it's such a big part.
Yeah.
It has to, I mean, the way you keep your home, the way you manage your money, the way you adventure in life, or, you know, aspire to goals. You know, I think all of it has to do with the partnership, and some partners do it very lovely, very peacefully and harmoniously. We are not those people. We were not those people, but we are proud, and we reflect a lot on how we have pushed through, even though it's not been easy and pretty with us. That, like, we talk a lot about how we got here. So we, you know, we went from having, my mom said to me recently, like, I can't believe you don't have your own checking account. Why don't you have your own bank account?
Like, you individually?
Me. Yeah. She's like, why don't you have your own money? And I was like, because when we got married, I had one nickel and he had the other nickel. We needed both of our nickels to rub together, Mom. Like, and then it just evolved. That way. And then it took me a while. And I remember coming back to her and saying, you know, Mom, he doesn't have his own bank account either. Like, for the record, it's not like we share money and then he has this pot of money out there. You know, we share money, and for us, there's full transparency, and that's worked for us because of what our financial situation was. And we could do it differently now. But there's just no reason in my mind. Right. But I think about all those years of, him like holding me back from all the things I wanted to do. And I'd get so mad at him because I wanted to spend money and he had these long-term goals. And now I can look back and say, thank you.
Right.
I'm so thankful that, you pushed me or held me back at times. And then he'll say the same to me because there were things that I've really pushed him on and, take that chance in your career or let's spend the money. Let's do this. Let's live this dream.
Right.
And that's been the great balance with us too, is that we do that back and forth.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, marriage counselors will often, make a recommendation that there be one bank account, one pot of money, and I mean, there's probably different ways to do it. I don't know that there's any right or wrong way, but I do think somebody mentioned on a previous episode about like just making sure that the balance of power is balanced. You don't want to have one person feel devalued.
Right.
Because the other person holds the purse strings,
right.
Vice versa.
Yeah. And I think, that's been a tricky thing. And one thing I really credit my husband with is that he has always managed our money and he's been for a lot of our marriage, the primary breadwinner.
Right.
And he's never one time ever made me feel like it was his money. Yeah, right. And I think that that's a key. Yep. I think it would have been the same as me flipping it and saying, well, they're my children, right?
Totally.
Like it's ours. We built this together, you know? And he recognized that if I had stayed on a career path all those years, that he probably couldn't have progressed like he did if he did have to do the 50-50 in the parenting.
Right.
He needed to be able to go.
And travel for work and that sort of thing.
So I think it has to be agreements.
Yeah.
I think you have to definitely come to what works for you. So I don't think there's a right or wrong.
Right. But be willing to have those conversations that get you to the place of agreement and not avoid those conversations.
And then change if it's not working. Because also realize that over time, you're not going to be the same,
Yeah. So your kids are older. Are they both out of the house now?
Yes, they are.
So you are empty nesters.
We are.
How's that going?
Gosh, I hope my children never, ever listen to this. It's been the most fun.
It's amazing.
No, it is. It is really nice to get back to after, 20 years of having kids in the house. So out of 29 of our years, we've had kids at home for 20 plus of them, really. Right. Because, there's that boomerang time too for some kids. So we are really enjoying our time together and remembering what brought us together in the first place.
Yeah.
The full circle moment. We're also fortunate our kids are local. Yeah. And we have great relationships with them.
That's good.
We hang out with them a lot, very frequently. I see, so yeah. And I think that what I have to say is probably because we both come from the stereotypical term of broken homes and have had different relationships with our parents over the years. I think what we are most proud of at the end of the day is our family of 4, now 5. My daughter's married. But, just the relationships that we have built and the closeness we have. Yeah. We have been, again, super intentional about it. And I feel fortunate that it's worked out for us, know, that they still want to spend time with us. We still want to spend time with them. And they understand that at this stage of the game, our relationships are priority again.
That's awesome. Yeah. Right. Because now they are in a place where they have their own relationships and they need to see that and know that like your spouse, your partner needs to be your priority, just like me and dad are our priority now. So that's really cool too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, again, we got lucky. We worked really hard. We put in a lot of effort. Yeah. We've been super intentional. We've made a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
My husband's really good at saying I'm sorry.
That's so good.
I'm
I
not
like that.
good at that at all. I feel like I'm the Fonz for anyone who knows what I mean by that. Do you know what I mean? How the Fonz could literally not say I'm sorry. Yeah. No, but I think it's just about not being afraid to work through the hard.
Mm-hmm. And you've had some hard points and you all have worked through them, been intentional. I mean, that's the key word I keep hearing for this episode is you two were intentional through all those hard struggles and you stuck to the vows.
We lived our vows.
Many people, you lived them. So many people just, they might say them or they write their own, but whatever it is, whether it's traditional vows or they wrote their own, they may not be intentional in sticking to those vows. And that sounds like that's been the key.
It is the key. And I don't think I knew that at first, but I think as I reflected back, I was like, oh yeah, check. We did that. We've done the hard times. We've done the good times. And we've had it all. Like we've had, we've been richer than we are now. We've been poorer than we are now. And and I'm grateful. I'm grateful because I know that if your marriage does sustain, if you have two people that are willing to work, that it does set you up kind of where I am in life in a lot of great ways. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I'm very grateful for it. Yeah. And we're still working on it. Like, we still make each other totally crazy and we still fuss and fight at each other. But it is, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, like since his health event and that could have been life-threatening. I think, that was a huge wake-up call for us.
Yeah. That's kind of beautiful, actually. Not his health event is beautiful. I don't mean that. But, like that thing was pivotal. Pivotal for us. And, you kind of probably refocused, reshifted, maybe did some things differently afterwards.
Oh, we've done so many things differently. Everything we thought we were going to wait for retirement to do. Right. We've started doing. That's awesome. The traveling, the next phase of life plans and, all the fun things we want to do. I mean, I think again, it's, I didn't do anything right or different than I think some people who unfortunately didn't end up still married at 29 years. Yeah. Because I think we all have that intention, but I think that there are people out there for sure who give up. Definitely. Right. And realize that the hard times and the sick times and the poor are part of it.
That's right. The good and the bad. Yeah. And the ugly. And all ugly. Of it.
Yeah.
It's all part of it.
And we've done the ugly.
Thank you, Amy. Any final thoughts you want to share with the audience on this episode?
I don't know. I think, just evaluate what works for you and don't compare.
I like that. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Comparison is the thief of joy. And I did let it steal some years. And and I think you just have to also, I think I heard on one of your episodes too, like marriage can look different for everyone. And you have to just go inwards. Yep. Kind of talked about that in parenting, but you have to go inwards and say what feels right for me, what works for me. And then you have to put in the effort.
Yep. And that's a great final thought, because if your marriage is working for you and it looks different than your neighbor's, that's okay. That's okay. As long as it's working for you. Yeah. Keep at it. Yeah. Great episode. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thanks for being honest about your struggles, but letting us know that being intentional is one of the keys to making marriage last. Yeah. Appreciate that. And thank you for listening. If you like what you heard today, be sure to give us a follow, a like, all those fun things, but definitely subscribe so you can hear all the episodes on the Love Actually relationship podcast series we're doing. Yeah. And we've got some great guests and some more to come. And so keep on listening. We appreciate you and have a great day. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate you taking time to listen. These days we live in feel stressful, challenging, and maybe even chaotic. I'm really passionate about putting out positive content that will encourage and inspire others. I ask that you like, follow, subscribe, and even give us a 5-star review. Most of all, share this with your friends and family so together we can help people turn their lives around.